Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Today, we are going deep into a collection of writings, observations, battle accounts, you name it.
Yeah, it's almost like we're getting a front row seat to a world at war.
Absolutely. And the goal is to really figure out what are the core conflicts here, what alliances are at play, and what are the personal stakes for the individuals in this story.
And the excerpts you've shared with me from Onyx Storm, the Empyrean 3, offer a really unique perspective, right? We're not reading a history book here. We've got personal addenda, we've got journal entries, correspondence, observational notes. It's really giving us a glimpse into this world.
Yeah, so picture this, right? We have a world that's engaged in this war against something called Venin, and we've got dragon riders, we have
Yeah.
political tensions between Navarre and Boromir, and even within the dragon riders, there are these different factions, or as they're called, quadrants.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a very complex situation.
Yeah, it is, and for you, the learner, we want to cut through the noise here and give you what you need to know. Like, for instance, we'll be hearing a lot about something called a signet. What is that exactly?
So a signet in this world is a unique magical ability that manifests in a dragon rider after they've bonded with their dragon. It's like
Right.
a magical fingerprint almost.
Yeah.
And it could be anything from elemental control to more nuanced abilities.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, like, are there any examples of different types of signets that appear in the story?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Violet, the main character, her signet is the power to wield lightning, which comes into play quite a bit. Others can control things like fire or even have abilities like farsight, seeing things at a distance.
Oh, that's so interesting. So, these signets are really like a huge part of how these dragon riders fight and interact with their world.
Exactly. They really shape who they are and how they function within their society.
Wow. Okay. So, let's get into the situation at hand here. It sounds like we're starting at a point of incredible urgency and some really fragile alliances.
Hmm.
The author is flying in a pretty bad storm. I think it was in January.
Yes, a January storm. And they're heading to a meeting about peace talks between Boromir and Navarre.
Oh, wow. So high stakes right from the start.
Very high stakes. And Boromir has issued an ultimatum. 7 days to come to an agreement or the deal's off.
7 days. That's a very short fuse.
It is. And to make matters worse, it's not just the storm that makes this flight dangerous. They're actively hunting dark wielders. The author specifically mentions that this type of flying is much more dangerous than, say, a pleasure flight.
Okay, so immediately we're thrown into this world of serious danger. And what are these dark wielders exactly?
Well, we don't get a full explanation right away, but they're clearly a major threat. The cadets, they're the young dragon riders. They've recently taken down 31 Venin around Basiath, so we know they're enemies.
31 Vinin.
Yeah.
That's a big number.
It is a significant win, but it doesn't mean they're out of the woods.
Right, right. Okay, so there's definitely this feeling of tension. Like everyone is on edge.
Definitely. And it's not just because of the Venin. The alliance between the Navarian and Ereshan riders, it seems that fell apart after a recent battle.
Oh, wow. So even within their own ranks, there's this fracturing.
Exactly. So imagine the atmosphere at Basgiath. These are supposed to be allied forces fighting a common enemy.
Yeah.
But there's this lack of trust, this tension.
Yeah. Yeah, I can only imagine. And right in the middle of all this chaos, we have this very personal conflict.
Right. The protagonist, Violet Sorrengail, she is completely focused on saving someone named Satan. She even calls it her own rebellion, although she says she's not leading one.
It sounds like there's a lot more to that story than we're getting right now.
I think you're right.
Okay. So let's shift focus a bit to Violet's personal challenges here. It sounds like she's dealing with some chronic pain and just the toll that riding takes on her body. There's this line, pain isn't a competition, there's always enough to go around. It's really striking.
It is. It speaks to her resilience, but also maybe a weariness from constantly enduring this pain.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder what keeps her going, what drives her.
Well, one thing that's clearly driving her is this mission to find Andarna's kind. We find out later that Andarna is an Irid scorpion tail, a rare dragon breed.
Oh, wow. So this search for Andarna's kind, it's not just about finding more dragons. It's deeply personal for Violet.
Exactly. And I think it's tied to this overall goal of saving Xaden.
Okay, so we have this physical pain, we have this personal mission, but then there's this other element that's really unsettling, this powerful individual who might be compromised.
Right. Karen Violet's dragon keeps mentioning someone called the Dark One and saying that their soul is no longer his own.
Oh, wow, that's creepy.
Yeah. And Violet keeps denying it. She says his eyes are back to normal. But Taryn seems convinced of the danger. It's later revealed that this Dark One is Jack. He's been influenced by someone called the Sage, and now he has dangerous power.
So it seems like there's this element of like mind control or manipulation going on.
It definitely suggests that.
Okay. Wow. And then on top of all of this, we see these internal disagreements and even acts of betrayal.
Right. Like when Colonel Chandler visits Sawyer, it's clear that it's not good news. And then there's this sudden attack in the infirmary, a real act of terror. It suggests there's a threat within their own ranks.
Yeah. Like they can't even trust their own people. And it just gets worse when they find out about the massacre in the Healer Quadrant.
Oh, yeah, that was horrifying. Dark wielders disguised as scribes, just slaughtering people. It's really chilling how deeply infiltrated they are.
It's terrifying. And then we have this dramatic rescue in the brig.
Right. Violet and others, they confront the dark wielders and end up rescuing someone. And guess who it is?
Jack, the Dark One.
Exactly. So the person Violet's so determined to save is also the one they just rescued from these dark wielders. It's all very tangled.
It is very tangled. Okay. Well, let's take a step back from Violet's personal mission for a moment and look at the political game that's being played. We see Violet meeting with the Cenarium to discuss the Poramish alliance and military assignments.
Right, and it's clear right away that Milgren holds a lot of power when it comes to assigning riders. Violet's trying to make sure that Lieutenant Rierson, who we think is probably Agnan, is included in those assignments.
And is she successful?
Well, she's trying. Her argument hinges on Terran and Skyle, their dragons, because they're deeply bonded, and that bond seems to be a big factor in military decisions.
So the connection between rider and dragon, it's not just a personal thing. It really affects strategy and tactics on the battlefield.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But right when they're trying to work all this out, Violet gets this message from someone named Takuris. He's demanding that she fulfills her end of a bargain within 3 days.
Oh, wow. That's a tight deadline.
Yeah, it really adds to the pressure. And if we look at the bigger picture, it turns out that Queen Mariah is hoping that the 7th breed, Andarna's kind, might hold the key to defeating the Venin.
Oh, so finding more of Andarna's kind could be the key to winning this war.
That's her hope. And it's a big reason why the Erishan cadets are still under Navarre's protection, even with all the tension.
Right, because they need those cadets, especially if they might be the key to finding more of the 7th breed.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's not just external politics that are causing problems. We also see some real family drama going on.
Oh, yeah. Violet has a tense conversation with her siblings, Brennan and Mira. They hint at past sacrifices and disagreements.
And Mira specifically seems to really disapprove of a dangerous plan that Violet is involved in.
Yeah, so even within her own family, she's facing conflict.
Wow, okay. And then things really start to escalate. We have this confrontation between the cadets, including Daenados, and a group of deserters.
Yeah, and it's brutal. It shows just how deep the divisions are within the writer community.
And Dan, his actions are particularly aggressive. Violet actually has to step in and use her signet, her lightning, to protect him from someone named Aura.
Right. It's a powerful moment. And they were introduced to this secret plan. Violet and others are working on something without Xaden knowing.
Oh, so there's a lot of secrecy and mistrust even among allies. What's this secret plan all about?
Well, a key part of it involves getting certain books. Violet's brother Brennan is helping with that.
And what's so special about these books?
They contain information about the Isles and potentially about how to fight the Venin. So knowledge itself is a weapon in this war.
That's interesting. But even with all the secrecy going on, we still see Xaden's protectiveness towards Violet.
Oh yeah, that comes through strong. Right before he leaves on a mission, he tells her how fiercely he'll protect her, and she promises him something in return. It's a really powerful moment.
It is. So with Xaden gone, Violet and her group undertake this risky operation beyond the wards.
Yeah, they go outside the protected area and immediately run into danger. And we see Imogen's skills become really important. I wonder what Imogen's signet is.
Yeah, that's a good question.
But even more daring is that they actually work to reactivate the wards.
Wait, the wards were down?
Yeah, and reactivating them is a huge risk. But they managed to pull it off. It really shows their ingenuity and courage.
But there are consequences, right?
Of course, they end up facing trial for treason.
Treason. Wow.
Yeah. But Violet, being Violet, she has a plan. She says, now we stand trial for treason. No, we won't. It's clear she's not going down without a fight.
She sounds like a real fighter.
She is. And while this is happening, we get a glimpse of the devastating impact the war is having outside the wards. There's a scene at a fortress where the casualties are just overwhelming, and the Venan, they're becoming more sophisticated in their attacks.
Oh, wow. So it's not just about the numbers of enemies, but how they're fighting.
Exactly. And then there's this concept of strategic losses, sacrificing smaller villages to protect larger populations. The really harsh reality.
It is. And on top of all that, Violet has to deal with the potential loss of her mother. She's not even sure if she misses her, or just the idea of her.
It's a very complex and emotional situation.
It is. And then we see her in the middle of an attack, frantically searching for something in her trunk. It shows just how constantly on edge they have to be.
Right. And on top of that, we're introduced to a new threat. Maze, who's bonded with Grime. They have long-range communication abilities.
Oh, wow. So that suggests a really sophisticated intelligence network, right?
Exactly. It's a serious problem.
Yeah. And then we see the really difficult decision to abandon a smaller Poramish village, a strategic loss.
Right. It highlights the impossible choices they have to make.
And then, as if things weren't complicated enough, this mysterious figure, Garrick, appears. He can control wind, apparently.
Yeah, it's completely out of the blue. Who is he? How did he get there? We don't know.
So many questions.
And then there's a huge revelation. Theophany, an enemy, she recognized Andarna as an Irid scorpion tail.
Oh, wow. So that confirms that Andarna is incredibly rare and important.
Exactly, which means she's a huge target.
This just keeps getting more and more dangerous for them.
It does. And then we see this deep connection between Violet and Xaden emerge. They're both having the same disturbing dream.
The same dream.
Yeah, about a sage and a city falling. It's clearly not just a coincidence. It suggests some kind of magical link between them.
That's creepy and fascinating at the same time.
Definitely. And speaking of magic, Violet's powers are evolving. She started to think that Dark Wielders might also have signets.
Oh, so the enemy is gaining magical abilities too.
It seems that way. And back at Bezjeth, Xaden is appointed as a professor, which creates a whole new set of problems.
Oh, how so?
Well, for one thing, he's romantically involved with Violet, who's a cadet, and that directly violates Article 8, Section 1 of the Code.
Oh, wow. So he's breaking the rules right off the bat.
He is. And General Ados already disapproves of Xaden in the relationship. So it's a very tense situation. And on top of all that, there are big disagreements about military strategy.
So even with this new appointment, there's still a lot of conflict and mistrust.
Definitely.
Okay. Well, despite all the drama, it sounds like Azen is taking his new role as a professor seriously. He's focused on training and sharing knowledge.
Yeah, he's teaching the cadets how to expose weaknesses and prepare for the Dark Wielders.
It sounds like a really practical and important approach.
It is. And we see Violet's signet continuing to develop. Her training with Aiden is really bringing out her lightning abilities.
It's interesting how their personal relationship seems to tie in with their magical development.
Yeah, it's definitely connected.
And it sounds like other cadets are developing new signets too.
Right. Sloane becomes a siphon, Avalon gets fire, and Baylor manifests Farsight. So we're seeing this whole range of abilities emerge.
Wow, it's amazing how these powers are manifesting. But it also sounds incredibly dangerous, especially with the threat of Dark Wielders having signets too.
Absolutely. And then right in the middle of all this, Violet undertakes this really perilous mission to Deverelli. It's called the Treacherous Isle of Merchants.
Treacherous? Why is it called that?
Well, we find out later that Deverelli is this unique place. They're dedicated to peace, but they're heavily armed. They're neutral in all conflicts. They focus on trade and knowledge.
So they're like this isolated power playing their own game.
Exactly.
Okay, and what's Violet doing there?
She's investigating the Krovlin uprising using her father's research. And to make matters worse, all communication with Terran and Xaden is cut off.
Oh, wow, so she's completely on her own.
Pretty much. And while she's there, all hell breaks loose back at Basyath. There are these accusations against Tekris, and then Halden backs out of an agreement.
Wait, so this Tekris guy, he's causing trouble again?
Big trouble. And it puts Violet in even more danger on Deverelli.
This is just one problem after another.
It is. But luckily, Xaden steps in. He gets the support of House Tyrandor and manages to salvage the situation.
Oh, that's a relief. So House Tyrandor, they're allies then?
It seems so, at least for now. And during this whole thing, Xaden reveals this dagger that looks a lot like a really important artifact. It suggests he has some secrets of his own.
Very interesting. So, back on Deverelli, Violet's trying to figure out what happened with this Crovlin uprising, right?
Right, and there's this strange detail about the dragons on the Isles. They can't communicate with other dragons telepathically unless those dragons are also on the Isles.
Oh, wow. So it's like their connection is blocked somehow.
Exactly.
And is there any connection between this telepathic blockage and the Crovlin uprising that Violet is looking into?
That's what she's trying to figure out. She's using her father's research as a guide. It seems he had a lot of insights into Deverelli and its history.
It sounds like he was a pretty smart guy.
He was.
Okay. So what else happens on Deverelli?
Well, Violet meets this knowledgeable figure named Norel, and they discuss her father's research. And we really see Violet's determination to protect Xaden come through.
Even though she's in this dangerous place, her focus is still on him.
Absolutely. And she's not alone on this mission. She has her friends with her Riddock, Kat, Dane, and even Mira.
Oh, wow. So it's a real team effort.
It is. And they visit this incredible outdoor palace belonging to the king of Deverelli. It's protected by these blue light orbs.
This sounds beautiful.
It does. And there's this intriguing moment where Eotrum, one of the dragons, starts roaring in this weird way, and Riddock can't understand him telepathically.
Oh, so maybe there's a different kind of dragon communication they're using on the Isles?
Maybe. It's definitely different from what we've seen before.
Okay. And then we have this meeting with the King of Deverelli. It sounds tense.
Very tense. Violet, Xaden, and Halden, they all meet with King Cortland. And there's a lot of suspicion in the air.
And what about Halden? I thought he had his own issues with Aiden.
He does. And during the meeting, Xaden basically declares his allegiance to Violet and House Tyrrendor. It's a big risk. And then Deverelli's true nature is revealed.
Oh, and what is their true nature?
They're not really neutral at all. They profit from supplying weapons to everyone in the war. They're playing both sides.
So they're basically war profiteers.
Pretty much. And they've amassed this huge amount of knowledge from observing the world.
Wow. They sound incredibly powerful, if a bit morally ambiguous.
Exactly. And the meeting falls apart when Holden loses it. He thinks they've been betrayed.
So another betrayal. What is it with these people?
I know, right? And in all this chaos, Tekris makes Violet an offer to join his court as a guard.
It sounds like he wants to control her power.
I think you're right. And then, to make matters even worse, the king of Deverelli wants dragons.
He wants to capture them.
Yeah, and that leads to a tense standoff. But Violet, in a stroke of brilliance, she uses Andarna's unpredictability to her advantage in the negotiation.
Oh, wow. So she uses Andarna's personality as leverage. That's smart.
It is. But then they get some really bad news. Crossing the ocean might mean losing their magical abilities.
Oh, no. So how will they get back?
That's a big question. And there's this chilling observation about the Venan. They seem to know about the Eretion wards, and they're ready for their fall.
It sounds like they have a spy or something. They know too much.
Right. And then, on top of all this, the Scenarium expects them to leave for Unbrile in a week. So Xaden needs to get back and heal quickly.
Okay, so a lot is riding on getting back to Basgiath safely.
A lot. And in the meantime, we learn more about Violet's father. He visited the Isles years ago and documented their language.
It sounds like he was more involved in all this than we initially realized.
I think so. And back at Basgiath, they're starting a new history class, focused on past conflicts and the Venan.
So they're trying to learn from the past to prepare for the future. Smart move.
Right. And they're preparing for this trip to Unbrile. Violet's squad is getting bigger, much to Mira's disapproval.
Oh, so there are some internal disagreements about who should be going.
Yeah. And Violet is even lying to Halden about where they're really going, so there's a lot of secrecy going on.
Wow. It sounds like they can't trust anyone.
Pretty much. But there's a bright spot. Eric decides to join the mission.
Oh, that's good. He's a good ally to have.
Definitely.
Okay, so what's the plan for Unbrile?
Well, it involves using Violet as bait.
As bait. That sounds incredibly dangerous.
It is. And we're reminded that Xaden is a really skilled fighter, which is going to be crucial for the trials in Unbrile.
Trials.
Yeah, they're described as trial by combat. So things are about to get very intense. And when they arrive in Unbrile, they meet this man who seems to know about their magic and the dangers of the place. It's all very ominous.
It is. So what happens in these trials?
Well, they face judgment based on the actions of others, not just themselves. It's like they're being held responsible for things they didn't even do.
That's not fair.
It's not. And during one of these trials, Violet channels Andarna's power and surprises everyone. It's a real show of force.
Wow. It sounds like she's really coming into her own.
She is. And then Dane steps up and volunteers to fight alongside her. It's a big moment for him. He shows real loyalty.
That's great. So what happens in the fight?
It's intense. Violet's using her armor and daggers, and she's really holding her own. But then they notice something strange. There are no blue robes present.
Blue robes.
Yeah, they're the attendants from Dun's temple. And the temple's really close by, but none of them are there. It's really suspicious.
It is. It sounds like there's something else going on that they don't know about.
Definitely. And after the fighting, there are a lot of injuries, including Violet. We see Andarna's attack, which is surprisingly effective, and Tarn is fiercely protective of Violet.
So even though they're winning these battles, they're still paying a high price.
Exactly. And then Halden reappears. He's the infantry liaison. But there's still tension between him and Axaden.
Yeah. So that rivalry is still simmering.
It is. And Tekerus is still pulling strings. He gives them information, but he clearly has his own agenda. We hear about the Emelian citrine again. It sounds like a really important object.
It does. Okay. And what about Aiden?
Well, he sees Halden as a threat to Violet and reacts really strongly. It's clear he's still very protective of her.
Okay. So we have a lot of moving pieces here. What happens next?
Well, Violet discovers these hidden wards protecting the commanding general's quarters, but she can't access them anymore.
Why not?
Because of her changed lineage. We still don't know exactly what that means, but it's clearly significant. And then we see her father's history text again. It's full of crucial information, and it is what led her to Deverelli in the first place.
So her father's research is still playing a huge role. And then we have this heartbreaking scene with Talia. She tries to convince Aiden to separate from Violet for 3 years for the sake of an alliance.
Oh, wow, that's a huge ask.
It is. And he refuses, of course. He chooses Violet over everything.
Yeah, it shows just how important she is to him. But then there's this crazy turn of events. Ferris poisons himself and Garrick to test an antidote.
He poisons them. Why would he do that?
We're not entirely sure, but it shows how far he's willing to go. And Violet vows to find the antidote and save Garrick. It's another example of her incredible loyalty.
Okay, so now they have this poisoning to deal with.
Right, and it creates a real dilemma. Xyden wants to save Garrick, of course, but they also need information from Ferris.
So they're racing against time on 2 fronts. What do?
Well, Karen gives Violet some advice. He tells her to think like Ferris, and it works. She figures out that Ferris is terrified of Scale.
Oh, that's interesting. So they use his fear against him.
Exactly. And Violet reveals that her father actually helped her uncover Ferris's plan. So he's still playing a role from beyond the grave.
Wow. Okay, and what about Xyden? How's he handling all this?
Well, he admits he's scared of what he might do while he's under the sage's influence. And Violet promises to never put herself between him and danger again. It's a powerful moment of vulnerability and love.
It really is. So amidst all this chaos, some good news arrives. The Paromish troops reach the border.
Yes, finally some reinforcements.
That's great. So how do they plan to use them?
Well, there are discussions about strategy and defenses. And then there's the sad reality of burying the dead.
Oh, right. They can't forget about those who have been lost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then a new mission emerges. They need to find more of Andarna's kind.
So it's back to searching for the 7th breed.
Right. And they're organizing search parties, with Violet taking a lead role.
It sounds like she's really stepping up as a leader.
She is. And then they finally meet Andarna's kin, the Irid dragons.
Oh, wow. That's a big moment. What are they like?
Well, it's a very formal and kind of intimidating encounter. Andarna shares information about past events and battles, trying to show that humans are worthy of their trust.
And how do the Irid dragons react?
They're not impressed. They basically say that humans are still using magic for violence and that Andarna is a failed criterion, a failed test.
Oh, no. That's awful. How does Andarna take that?
She's devastated. It's clear that their judgment really hurts her.
So what happens next? Do they just give up?
No. Violet is still determined to find a cure for Xaden, even if it means being self-destructive.
He's not giving up on him.
Not at all. And then, on the journey back, there's this feeling of unease. Mira is worried about Violet, and they realize they can't risk flying in certain weather because of the lightning.
Right, because of Violet's signet, it makes them more vulnerable.
Exactly. And then Violet figures out how the Venan might be anticipating their movements.
Oh, no. So they have a way of knowing what they're planning?
It seems that way.
Yeah.
But there's also a bit of hope. Sawyer's still working on his prosthesis, trying to improve it. He's not giving up.
That's good. He's a real trooper.
He is. And then Violet has this awful nightmare about a wound. It really shakes her up. And it makes her even more worried about Xaden.
Okay, so things are really starting to come to a head.
They are. And Violet and Xaden realize that their shared nightmares, they're not random. They're connected to real threats.
Like the sage.
Yes, and Zayden's fight with the Dark Wielder.
Wow. So these dreams are giving them glimpses of the past and maybe even the future. That's scary.
It is. And meanwhile, Brennan is analyzing the Venans' tactics and suggesting ways to defend against them. He's really valuable in this strategic role.
Yeah, he's the brains of the operation.
Pretty much. And Zordon tells his cousin Bodhi to stay safe during the attack. He's really worried about his family. And then the attack comes. A massive Venan attack on the city.
Oh, no. This is it.
Yeah, it's all-out war now.
Yeah.
And Violet, she uses a stone shield to protect everyone. It's a selfless act of courage.
She's amazing. So what happens in the battle?
Well, chaotic. Taryn and the other dragons are fighting the Wyvern.
Ugh.
And then there's this terrible moment where Scariel is badly hurt.
Oh, no, not Scarl.
Yeah. And then Taryn and Violet, they're captured in a net. It's a really bad situation.
So what do?
Violet tries to use runes to escape, but it's not clear if it'll work. And then we find out Eric's secret.
His secret? What is it?
He's precognitive. He can see the future. That's why he gave Violet that marble from Dun's temple. It was all part of his plan.
Wow. So he knew this was going to happen. That's incredible.
It is.
Did you get any of that?